Generally speaking, when we think about the ways that we can make our lives better, personally or professionally, we typically begin by making a list of all the things we think we should do. Whether it's to start going to the gym and meal prepping, make time for reading new books, or do more sales and outreach, we create these lengthy to-do lists for ourselves. But sometimes, or at least in my experience, it's easier to start with a don't do list or a to not do list, whichever floats your boat. Which is why recently I've become really obsessed with this idea of how the things we don't do are equally responsible for making us who we are as the things we do. Yes, I said do. But to give you an example, at the beginning of 2022, I decided to give up alcohol. As much as I love a nice whiskey, I decided that it's probably something my life would be better without. And if you want to know the reasoning behind this decision, just type in Jordan Peterson alcohol on YouTube. Any of the top videos that pop up should suffice. But the point is that drinking alcohol is now something that I don't do. And giving up the use of a drug, because alcohol is a drug, isn't necessarily super novel in and of itself. And luckily, in my case, I was never addicted to alcohol, nor have I ever had a particularly bad relationship with it. Still, the bottom line is that this is something that I've deliberately decided not to do moving forward. But the most interesting part of this process for me has been realizing how easy it is to not do things. So sure, there have been times where I've been out with friends or at a restaurant and the thought of having a whiskey or a glass of wine sounds really appetizing. But it's pretty easy to not do anything, meaning not order a drink, or just say, no thanks, I don't drink. And as long as you have a supportive group of friends, you probably won't get very much pushback. And if you do get a lot of pushback, that might be a good sign that it's time to find some new friends, preferably ones that support you and your goals. But that's a topic for another video. And you know, for me, the most recent example of this was when I was in Paris with one of my best friends for his 30th birthday. Every night of the week that we were there, my friends would go and buy a few bottles of wine, and then we'd bring them back to our Airbnb, sit in the living room, and play a card game called Uno. So don't get me wrong, when you're sitting in another country with some of your best friends and you're having a great time as they're drinking, the temptation to join them and start drinking as well is definitely there. But in those moments, you kind of just have to ask yourself what you want most versus what you want now. And the truth is, more often than not, you don't necessarily have to sacrifice a whole lot now to get what you want most. So in my case, I didn't have to sacrifice a whole lot by not drinking with them. You know, I certainly could have been tipsy and continued to play Uno with them, but I still had a great time, I still got to socialize, and I don't think that being drunk or tipsy would have really changed that experience a whole lot. Now, the other interesting part about doing less, which is the main reason that I wanted to make this video, is how not doing something can have an equally positive impact on one's life as actually doing something positive. So let me give you an example. Let's say that your goal for this year is to lose some weight and become healthier. Usually when people take on a goal like this, they approach it by saying things like, I'm gonna start going to the gym every day, or I'm going to plan all of my meals for each week. And look, these are fantastic habits to have, but the chances of you doing a 180 and jumping full force into working out every day and then spending your Sundays meal prepping and sticking with it for the long haul are pretty slim. Habits like these are ones that you want to ease into and build up over time, which is why I would argue that it is much easier to start with don't eat junk food than it is to go to the gym every day or meal prep all of your meals for each week. Because whereas doing something like going to the gym or meal prepping requires planning an action in a specific area of our lives, not doing something requires the opposite, inaction or nothing. Yet the irony is that I would argue that they're almost equally beneficial. If you can cut out the bad inputs like junk food from your life, your outputs like your physical health will become much better. And look, I know that saying it requires nothing is probably a little unfair given that you do have to resist temptation. So every time you're at the grocery store or the pharmacy, you're gonna have to walk by the candy and snack aisle and not feed into your monkey brain's desires. But let's be honest, if you can't not do something, that probably means you're addicted, and that's a topic for a whole nother video that I'm not gonna get into. But the key takeaway here is that when you're cutting something out of your life, whether it's junk food, caffeine, alcohol, or even social media, the goal is to make these things a non-thought. In the same way that if somebody ran up to you with a crack pipe and said, hey, do you want to smoke this? Hopefully your immediate reaction would be to say no. And frankly, it shouldn't even cross your mind that saying yes is an option. And it's kind of that level of impulse that you want to achieve with the things that you're cutting out from your life. You just have to repeatedly tell yourself, this is something I don't do. And the first couple of times that you do it, it'll probably be a little hard and the temptation is going to be there. But after the 5th, 6th, 10th, 20th, 50th time, you'll have reinforced this idea so much to the point where it becomes a non-thought. And this concept has actually inspired me to give up a handful of other things. I've given up caffeine, I decided to stop eating junk food or food with high sugar content, and I've also decided to stop watching YouTube, Netflix, and other forms of cheap entertainment unless I'm doing it socially with friends as they're at my apartment or something of the sort. These are all things that I've decided that I don't do. And before I wrap up this video, I want to clarify one thing. I'm not trying to say that you should cut out everything that's remotely bad from your life, even if you love it, just because you can. I think that vices have their place. Instead, I'm saying that rather than figuring out if there's anything you can add to your plate to make your life better, see if there's anything you can subtract first. And who knows, I very well may decide that I want to reintroduce alcohol, sugar, and caffeine into my life in the future. But the point is that I want to do so intentionally. You have complete autonomy to decide the things you do, and perhaps more importantly, don't do.